Last night, 10 candidates faced off in the fifth Democratic debate. From the beginning of the debate, substantive policy issues were at the forefront, and I'm just with you, we're going to talk about impeachment. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. This has been an explosive week of testimony in Washington, and if you'd like an example of just how shocking and crazy things have been, I'd like to direct you to C-SPAN, the network of empty chairs and sleeping congressmen. C-SPAN is normally a source of calm and consistency, but the tone was a little different today when they were taking calls on impeachment, and someone from Florida called in after someone from Alabama and said this.
Howdy. I just want to apologize first and foremost for all the morons on the calls earlier, especially from, Alabama and all that. Secondly, I just want to say impeach the Have a great day.
Thanks, Money. In Florida, that's it for phone calls right now.
Oh, my God. Impeachment's been so crazy, C-SPAN is turning into Howard Stern. So that's just a little glimpse into how crazy Washington's been this week. Now, the actual impeachment hearings have been nothing short of jaw-dropping, with one bombshell after another. The testimony this week has directly tied virtually every senior official in Trump's inner circle to a corrupt quid pro quo, in which the president used hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money appropriated by Congress to solicit a bribe from a foreign country to help him in the 2020 election. That's it. That's the major takeaway I wish everyone would remember. In fact, if I knew how to cross-stitch, I'd get that sewn onto a pillow and sell it in the NBC store. Although the merch in the C-SPAN store is much better. Now remember, before these hearings, the only line of defense Trump and his allies had, the line they kept repeating over and over and over again, was that there was no quid pro quo with Ukraine.
There's no quid pro quo, no demand, no pressure, no threat.
There's no quid pro quo.
There was no quid pro quo.
There is no quid pro quo.
There is no quid pro quo.
There was no quid pro quo.
There was no quid pro quo.
There was no quid pro quo.
But listen to this. There is no pro quo.
In a way, that's Trump's best defense. How can I be guilty of something if I can't even remember how to say it? So there you go. Trump says there was no pro quo, which sounds like something a tourist would say in Europe when one of those dudes comes into the restaurant selling flowers. Scusi? No pro quo. But yesterday, that talking point was completely blown up when Trump's hand-picked ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland, a businessman who donated $1 million to Trump's inaugural committee and who was a central player in the Ukraine scheme, said there was, in fact, a quid pro quo.
Was there a quid pro quo? As I testified previously, with regard to the requested White House call and the White House meeting, the answer is yes.
Man, not only did he answer the key question, he asked it himself. Gordon Sondland was so determined to bring down Trump, he didn't even need anyone else in the room with him. He could have just interviewed himself. Mr. Sondland, was there a quid pro quo? Yes, Mr. Sondland, there was. And that's the tea. So there it is. He settled it definitively once and for all. There was, in fact, a quid pro quo. What could Trump's defense possibly be? I never said there was no quid pro quo. I said there was
no pro quo.
Totally different. So everyone in the White House knew what was going on. In fact, Sondland named tons of people, from Trump to Vice President Mike Pence, all the way down the chain.
President Trump, Vice President Pence, Secretary Perry, Ambassador Volker, Secretary Pompeo, Ambassador Bolton, Chief of Staff Mulvaney, Rudy Giuliani.
My God, it's like he was reading from a phone book of criminals. I guess in this case, it would be called the Very White Pages. So everyone knew what was happening, or as Sondland put it in his testimony yesterday,
everyone was in the loop. It was no secret.
Of course, this administration has no secrets, because every time they do something secret, Rudy Giuliani runs to the nearest TV camera, confesses to everything, and gives us the evidence.
Did our State Department ask you to go on a mission for them?
They did.
So you did ask Ukraine to look into Joe Biden?
Of course I did. And you know who I did it at the request of? The State Department. It's all here, right here.
He literally confessed to all of it, then showed us the evidence. Rudy already held his own impeachment inquiry by himself. He's like a guy who sees the cops at his door and breaks down before they ask him a question. Fine, I robbed the bank. Here's the gun I used, and here's the cash. Sir, I am just here to check the meter. So in many ways, we already knew the core facts at the heart of the case, but this week's testimony has made it clear as day. Yes, there was a quid pro quo. Yes, it was ordered by the president. Yes, everyone else knew about it. And yes, it was designed specifically to help Trump win the 2020 election, which is important because the other line of defense Republicans have used was that Trump was just concerned about corruption in Ukraine in general. In fact, Rudy Giuliani, who is reportedly under criminal investigation, repeated that argument yesterday in an interview with Glenn Beck, but I don't think it came out quite the way Rudy intended it.
It's rumored they're investigating me for bribery. I like to know who I bribed. I don't bribe people. I've been doing this for 50 years of my life. I've never had a complaint. I think people understand that I have a very, very great passion for corruption.
Oh, no, that didn't come out the way you wanted it to. You made it sound like corruption is one of your hobbies. That's how someone would describe themselves in their Tinder bio. I have a great passion for swimming, horseback riding, corruption, and pulling the skin all the way back behind my head. You gotta be careful how you phrase stuff, man. Rudy saying that he has a great passion for corruption would be like OJ saying, man, I'd kill for a ham sandwich right now. Two people. But obviously, this was not about corruption in general. This was about helping Trump specifically. Yesterday, for example, Sondland admitted in an exchange with Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney that the investigations were explicitly designed to benefit Trump, although it took some coaxing to get it out of him.
Who would have benefited from an investigation of the president's political opponents?
I don't want to characterize who would have and who would not have.
I know you don't want to, sir. That's my question. Would you answer it for me?
Restate your question.
Who would benefit from an investigation of the president's political opponent?
Well, presumably the person who asked for the investigation.
Who's that?
If the president asked for the investigation, it would be he.
Well, it's not a hypothetical, is it, sir? Who would benefit from an investigation of the Bidens?
They're two different questions.
I'm just asking you one. Who would benefit from an investigation of the Bidens?
I assume President Trump would benefit.
There we have it, see?
Trump. The answer was Trump. That exchange was excruciating. It was like watching someone else open a pickle jar, and when they finally got it open, the only pickle inside was one with weird hair on it. So you heard Sondland very clearly there. This was all orchestrated to hurt Trump's political rivals and help the president win. And today we got more testimony that confirmed that fact from a State Department official named David Holmes. Holmes was with Sondland in Ukraine when Sondland called Trump to talk about the scheme, and Holmes overheard that conversation. Now, you recall that yesterday, Sondland confirmed the account that Holmes had given, an account Holmes repeated today.
I heard Ambassador Sondland greet the president and explain he was calling from Kyiv. I heard President Trump then clarify that Ambassador Sondland was in Ukraine. Ambassador Sondland replied, yes, he was in Ukraine, and went on to state that President Zelensky, quote, loves your ass. I then heard President Trump ask, so he's going to do the investigation. Ambassador Sondland replied that he's going to do it.
He also testified that you confirmed to President Trump that you were in Ukraine at the time and that President Zelensky, quote, loves your ass, unquote. Do you recall saying that?
Yeah, it sounds like something I would say.
That is the face of a man who has no left to give. I mean, yeah, man. Yeah. That sounds like Gordon Sondland. Mind if I crack open a brewski? It's party time. So Holmes overheard Trump ask Sondland about the investigations, and just in case it wasn't absolutely clear what they were talking about, when Sondland got off the phone with Trump, Holmes asked him to clarify, and Sondland confessed to everything on the spot.
After the call ended, Ambassador Sondland remarked that the president was in a bad mood. As Ambassador Sondland stated, it was often the case early in the morning. I then took the opportunity to ask Ambassador Sondland for his candid impression of the president's views on Ukraine. In particular, I asked Ambassador Sondland if it was true that the president did not give an expletive about Ukraine. Ambassador Sondland agreed that the president did not give an expletive about Ukraine.
Hey, man, you don't gotta bleep yourself. You can just say it. We're way past bleeping. A porn star went on TV and talked about the president's and people are dropping F-bombs on C-SPAN. We are through the looking glass, baby. But then Holmes continued and said that Sondland made it clear to him that all Trump cared about was investigating his political rival, Joe Biden.
Ambassador Sondland agreed that the president did not give an expletive about Ukraine. I asked why not. And Ambassador Sondland stated that the president only cares about big stuff. I noted there was big stuff going on in Ukraine, like a war with Russia. And Ambassador Sondland replied that he meant big stuff that benefits the president, like the Biden investigation that Mr. Giuliani was pushing. I briefed the call in detail to the deputy chief of mission, went away for a week, come back, I refer to the call, and everyone is nodding. Of course that's what's going on. Of course the president is pressing for a Biden investigation before he'll do these things the Ukrainians want. There was nodding agreement. Everyone by that point agreed. It was obvious what the president was pressing for.
It was obvious. This is about the Bidens. Sondland said it himself. In fact, I got Rudy on FaceTime right now. Rudy, did you ask Ukraine to investigate the Bidens?
Of course I did.
Thank you. And if you're wondering how Holmes could have overheard Trump speaking on Sondland's phone, Holmes even did a physical reenactment to show just how loud Trump was yelling.
When the president came on, he sort of winced and held the phone away from his ear like this. And he did that for the first couple exchanges. That's how I was able to hear it.
I definitely believe that's how it happened. That's just how old people talk into phones. They think every phone is like a ham radio during World War II. Hello, is anyone out there? Are you receiving this message? Does he love my ass? So, Rudy was at the center of this, and everything he was doing, he did at the express direction of the president. Everyone knew what was going on, even if they weren't happy about it. In fact, Sondland made that clear in his testimony yesterday, and again today, Holmes and former national security official Fiona Hill made it clear using several colorful metaphors.
President Trump directed us to, quote, talk with Rudy. Mr. Giuliani's requests were a quid pro quo. Mr. Giuliani was expressing the desires of the President of the United States.
Ambassador Bolton had looked pained, basically indicated with body language that there was nothing much that we could do about it. And he then, in the course of that discussion, said that Rudy Giuliani was a hand grenade that was going to blow everyone up.
Someone wondered aloud why Mr. Giuliani was so active in the media with respect to Ukraine. My recollection is that Ambassador Sondland stated, quote, damn it, Rudy, every time Rudy gets involved, he goes and F's everything up.
I love that they were all mad at Rudy for going on TV and blabbing about their scheme. They're like guys planning a bank heist going, all right, it's a perfect plan. There's no way we'll get caught. Wait, no, where's Rudy? Where's Rudy? Oh, no. So Holmes shared his recollections of what he overheard on the phone call with Trump. Trump was on the other end, but he was speaking loudly enough that Holmes could hear him, an account that Sondland himself confirmed yesterday. But still, Trump and his allies remain unconvinced. Trump, for example, insisted this morning that overhearing someone on a phone call was impossible, and he would know because he's tried.
President Trump not buying it on Twitter, explaining, I've been watching people making phone calls my entire life. My hearing is and has been great. Never have I been watching a person making a call which was not on speakerphone and been able to hear or understand the conversation. I even tried, but to no avail.
You are a weird, weird man. What do you mean? You've been watching people make calls your entire life. What do you mean? I'm willing to bet the only reason it didn't work is because when he listens to phone calls, Trump stands right behind you and makes no attempt to hide himself. Oh, excuse me, sir, do you mind going away? No, I can't go away because I'm listening to your phone call. Here's what we learned this week. There was a corrupt quid pro quo in which the President of the United States solicited a bribe from a foreign country to interfere in the 2020 election, and everyone knew about it. We have the testimony, we have the evidence, that's it. It's an open and shut case. The Republicans have no defense, so all they can do is lie and attack the witnesses. I don't know what they'll do next, but as for the Democrats, it sure looks like they're gonna
impeach the.
This has been a closer look.